"Take it off." I said, "Take that damn suit off. Now!" The policeman's voice roared, shrill and malicious, tearing through the morning silence of Central Memorial Park. One hand pointed at his formal uniform, his fingers shaking with anger, his fingertips white from the pressure. His other hand had drawn a Glock 19 from its holster, an unmistakable threat in cold steel and black polymer. "You don't deserve to wear it. Good men died for that uniform. You have no right to make a joke of it." The older man in his immaculate dark blue Army service uniform did not flinch. He stood straight as a granite pillar, his shoulders square, his chin held high. He had stood before generals, politicians, and enemy guns in distant lands the officer had seen only on television. His stance was unchanged. The medals lined up neatly on his chest glinted in the morning sun, reflecting the officer's distorted, angry image. The black muzzle of the gun was now aimed directly at the center of those medals, at the very heart of the uniform. Why was a highly decorated military officer treated like a criminal by a police officer in the middle of a public park? Where did this terrible insult come from? And can honor, forged over 3 decades of service and sacrifice, prevail in the face of a gun and blind hatred? To understand the madness of this moment, we must go back to the beginning, to the quiet actions before dawn. Dawn in Crestwood has a quiet beauty. The first light filters through the leaves of the old oak trees outside the window, casting long streaks of light across the hardwood floors of the neat little house. Inside, retired Colonel James Sterling has been up for an hour. He doesn't need an alarm clock. His body, honed by 30 years of military discipline, springs to life automatically at 5 a.m. every morning. It's a habit ingrained in his blood, a legacy from his days as an ambitious young second lieutenant at Fort Benning, Georgia. After making a cup of black coffee without sugar, he went into his study. It was a small room, but everything was orderly. Books on military history were neatly arranged on the shelves. A few framed photos were on the desk. A black and white photo of his parents, a photo of him and his late wife, Sarah, on their wedding day, her smile as bright as the sun, and another photo of him standing with the soldiers of his battalion in Afghanistan, all of them dusty and tired but with determined eyes. Today was an important day. He opened the closet door, where his Army Blues uniform hung respectfully in a protective cloth bag. He didn't wear it often anymore, maybe once or twice a year. Every time he put it on, he felt its weight, not just the weight of the thick wool and the metal, but the weight of 30 years of memories, 30 years of service, 30 years of goodbyes and reunions. He laid the uniform carefully on the made bed. He smoothed the fabric, smoothing out the creases that were invisible to the naked eye. Then he took out a small oak box lined with red velvet. Inside were the medals, each shining. He began to attach them to the metal bar. Each one represented a chapter in his life. The Combat Infantryman badge, proof of his infantry service, faced the enemy head-on. He recalled the feeling of his first battle, the chaos, fear and adrenaline all mixed together, the unit's certificate of merit, a recognition for the whole group. He remembered the faces of the soldiers who had gone through life and death with him, the young men from all over the country who had placed their trust in his leadership. Each campaign medal marked a distant land he had visited: the Persian Gulf, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. Each carried the scent of desert sand, the cold of a European winter, and the scorching heat of the Middle East. And then the heavier ones, 2 Purple Hearts. He touched one lightly. Memories came flooding back. Not heroic memories, but painful memories. The burning of shrapnel in his shoulder in Fallujah, the smell of blood and gunpowder, the helpless feeling of lying on a stretcher. He had been lucky. Many others had not. Finally, at the top, separate and noble, was the Silver Star. He paused a moment longer, his finger lightly touching the small star in the center. The memory was not his, but someone else's. A memory of a dusty hill in Kandahar province. His squad was ambushed from 3 sides. The sound of gunfire, bullets whistling in his ears, the screams of a wounded young soldier. He didn't think. He just acted. He organized the counterattack, providing cover fire as he moved, pulling his men out of harm's way one by one. He didn't remember how he did it. He only remembered the faces of the young men when they were safe, their eyes of gratitude and wonder. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He was just doing his job as a leader, bringing his men home after putting on his uniform. He stood in front of the full-length mirror. The 60-year-old man in the mirror looked back at him. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and the wrinkles around his eyes were deeper, a mark of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. But his eyes were still clear and determined. His posture was still straight. He was no longer an active officer, but once a soldier, always a soldier. He wasn't wearing the uniform today to show off. He was wearing it out of respect. Respect for the occasion, respect for the person he was meeting, and respect for what the uniform represented. He had a meeting at 9 a.m. with Crestwood Mayor Robert Thompson. They were meeting at Central Memorial Park to discuss final plans for next month's Veterans Day parade. The mayor had specifically asked him, as a retired high-ranking officer well-respected in the community, to serve as advisor and honorary commander for the parade. For Sterling, it was a duty. Since Sarah's death 2 years ago, he had felt an emptiness. Serving the city, even in small ways, would help fill that void, help him continue to live a purposeful life. Meanwhile, across town, in a small coffee shop, Officer Mitch Duggan sat in his patrol car, munching on a stale donut and drinking weak coffee. His partner, a younger cop named Peters, was driving. Peters was a nice kid, still idealistic about his job, which made Duggan even more uncomfortable. "Just another day at this circus," Duggan grumbled, mouth full of cake. Dealing with all the filth of society while the office crowd sits back and enjoys the benefits? Mitch Duggan is the embodiment of discontent. He was a high school football star, the hope of his town, but a vicious tackle in the state semifinals shattered his knee cartilage, ending his dreams of playing college and possibly even professionally. His life took a different turn. He joined the police force, thinking it would be a prestigious, powerful job. But after 12 years, he was still a patrol officer. He watched as men he considered his inferiors were promoted, and he grew bitter. That bitterness turned into contempt for the world. He believed he was one of the few people left who knew right from wrong, and the world was going downhill fast. His inner self was a tangle of prejudice and jealousy. He had tried to join the army as a young man after his football dreams had been shattered, thinking it would be a way to regain his dignity. But the army doctor had rejected him because of his old knee. "Not stable," he said dismissively. The feeling of being rejected, of being not good enough, had left a deep scar on his ego. He was both jealous and contemptuous of the military. He was addicted to stolen valor videos online, where veterans exposed imposters. He felt a righteous rage, a sense of self-respect that he had never been. And his racial prejudice runs as deep as a well. He never says racist things out loud, but it shows in his every action, his every glare, his every decision. He believes there is a natural order to things, and anyone who deviates from that order in his head is a threat, an aberration that must be rectified. They received orders over the radio to patrol Central Memorial Park. "Great," Duggan muttered. "Keep an eye on the squirrels and the old men sleeping on the benches. What a glorious job." Colonel Sterling drove his 2005 Buick LeSabre to the park. It was Sarah's car, and he took good care of it. He arrived 20 minutes early. It was another military habit. 15 minutes early is on time. On time is late. and late is unacceptable. He arrived early to survey the terrain, to be prepared. He parked in the public lot and stepped outside. The morning air was fresh, with the smell of freshly cut grass and damp earth. He walked along the paved main path, holding a set of plans the mayor's office had sent him. The park was beautiful, lined with ancient oak trees and carefully tended flower beds. In the center was a large fountain, and behind it was the memorial wall, engraved with the names of Crestwood's sons who had died in the wars. He stopped near the fountain where the parade would begin. He was busy comparing the layout to the ground, calculating the placement of the veterans' units, the high school band, and the grandstand. He wanted everything to be perfect. It was the least he could do to honor his brothers. From the slowly passing patrol car, Dugan saw him. Dugan's mind was struck by lightning. He saw a black man. He saw an army colonel's uniform covered with medals. Those two images, in his narrow, prejudiced worldview, couldn't exist together. They clashed. They were wrong. A black man as a colonel. Maybe. But certainly not one like this, standing alone in the park, looking like he was sneaking around. His brain, programmed by years of prejudice, immediately rejected that possibility and settled on the only explanation it could accept, the one it craved. This was a fraud, an imposter, a clown who was desecrating everything he held sacred. A cold and hot rage rose inside him at the same time. This was it. This was not another boring day. This was his chance to show off, to be a hero, to expose a fake and defend the honor of the army. "Stop the car," he ordered Peters, his voice dry. Peters stopped the car. "What's wrong, Mitch?" "I'll show you what's going on," Dugan said, opening the car door. He puffed out his chest, adjusted his gun belt with a smug look, and walked straight toward Sterling, striding like a hunter who had found his prey. Sterling was so focused on the diagram that he didn't notice the approaching policeman until he was only a few feet away. He looked up. "Good morning," Dugan said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Nice suit. Where did you get it?" Sterling looked up from his papers, a little surprised by the officer's question and his insolent tone. He looked at him, saw the smug expression and the mocking gaze. He had seen such gazes before, in many places around the world and even in this country. They were the eyes of a man who had made up his mind before asking the question. "I didn't rent it, officer," Sterling replied politely, his voice low and even, betraying no irritation. "It's mine." "Oh, it's yours?" Dugan sneered, a nasty sound. "Then you must be someone very important. A 5-star general in disguise, perhaps? May I see your papers?" Sterling sighed discreetly. He didn't want to cause trouble. He just wanted to get his work done and see the mayor. He calmly set the papers down on a nearby bench, took out his worn leather wallet, and handed Dugan his retired military ID. Dugan snatched the card from his hand, an unnecessary rudeness. He glanced at it and curled his lip. "Colonel James Sterling. That sounds great. This is an easy fake. I've seen better ones on eBay. Do you think I'm stupid?" He threw the card back to Sterling, where it fell to the ground near his feet. The action was a deliberate insult. Sterling looked down at the card, then back up at the officer. For the first time, a cold glint appeared in his eyes. "Officer," he said, his voice starting to take on a steely edge. "I don't know what your problem is, but I'm here on city business. I have an appointment with the mayor in 15 minutes. Please pick up my badge." The mention of the mayor only made Dugan angrier. He assumed it was a blatant lie meant to scare him. "The mayor? Well done. Now you're dragging the mayor into this." He stepped closer, invading Sterling's personal space, trying to use his size to intimidate. "You know, I hate people like you. People who wear clothes they don't have the right to wear. who cheat people to get discounts, to get respect. Respect you never deserve. He began to point at the medals on Sterling's chest, his dirty fingers almost touching the carefully ironed fabric. "What's this?" He poked at the combat infantryman badge. "The badge for being the best paintball player in the neighborhood? And this one?" He pointed at Purple Heart. "Did he fall off his bike while delivering newspapers? Poor thing." Sterling clenched his hands in his white gloves. The humiliation hurt more than the shrapnel that had pierced his shoulder in Fallujah. Every word the officer spoke was a stab to the memory of the dead, to the honor of the living. But 30 years of discipline held him back. He could not let an ignorant, hateful man provoke him. "What about this one?" Dugan pointed to the silver star, the centerpiece of the medals. "This one's probably the biggest. You got it from a cereal box. What did you do to get it? Tell me, hero." That was the last straw. The humiliation to himself he could bear. But the blasphemy against the meaning of that star, against the sacrifice of his soldiers, was unforgivable. "Officer," Sterling said, his voice no longer cold, but sharp as a honed knife, "you are crossing a very dangerous line. I have earned each of these medals with the blood, sweat, and tears of my fallen comrades. I have seen friends far better than you die in this uniform. You have no right to speak of it. Now, I order you, as a citizen of this city, to stand back, pick up my badge, and return to your car." The calm, unshakable authority in Sterling's voice, instead of making Dugan flinch, infuriated him. He could not bear the thought of this impostor giving him orders. His wounded pride and blind prejudice exploded into uncontrollable rage. "You dare order me around?" he roared, his face red. "Who do you think you are?" And that was when he pulled out his gun, a scene of madness and hatred unfolding under the morning sun, in a park built to commemorate people like Colonel Sterling. The black muzzle of the Glock was pointed straight at the silver star on Colonel Sterling's chest, only a few feet away. A twitch of a finger, and tragedy would have struck. "I will not let a man like you defile this uniform," Dugan shouted, spit flying. He felt like a hero in a movie, a defender of truth, a warrior against lies. Sterling did not back down. He did not look at the gun. He looked the officer straight in the eyes, and in those eyes he saw not the anger of a law enforcement officer, but the fear and uncertainty of a weak man trying to appear strong with a gun. He had seen that look in the eyes of child gunmen on the streets of Baghdad. "Put down your weapon, son," Sterling said, his tone less of a command than a paternal plea, a final plea for reason. "Don't make a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." "Shut up," Dugan yelled. "You have no right to call me son. I'm a police officer. You're nothing." At that moment, a shiny black Lincoln Town car with official city plates slowly pulled into the park's main driveway. It stopped about 50 meters away. The luxury car looked out of place in the tense scene. The back door opened, and Mayor Bob Thompson stepped out. He was a large man with neatly combed silver hair, wearing an expensive gray suit. He had just finished a phone call and was holding a paper cup of coffee. He glanced at his Rolex. 8:58 a.m. Great. He smiled, pleased that he had arrived early for his important appointment. He looked up, looking for the man he was supposed to meet, Colonel Sterling, and then he froze. His heart stopped beating. He saw Officer Mitch Dugan, one of the city police, whose attitude he had heard several times, pointing his gun at a man. And that man was wearing a colonel's uniform. My God. The mayor squinted. He recognized the man. That was the man he was looking for. "Colonel Sterling!" the mayor shouted, his voice filled with shock and panic. The fear quickly turned to a fiery rage. He threw his coffee cup to the ground, the brown liquid splashing across the stone floor, and ran toward them, his political dignity gone, replaced by the anger of a citizen. "What the hell is going on here?" Dugan heard the call. He turned and saw the mayor charging like a bull. His face was as white as a sheet. The mayor? Here? Now? Impossible. This was some cruel trick of fate. Mr. Mayor," he stuttered, lowering his gun, looking utterly embarrassed and pitiful. I'm dealing with a situation, possibly stolen valor." The mayor did not even glance at him. He ran straight to Sterling, who remained motionless. "James, are you okay? Oh my God, are you okay?" the mayor asked, his voice filled with concern. "I'm fine, Bob," Sterling replied, his voice unnaturally calm. "Just a little misunderstanding." "Mind misunderstanding?" The mayor turned on Dugan, and the rage he had been holding back exploded like a volcano. "Are you mad? Do you know who you just pointed your gun at? What?" I thought he was a fake," Dugan mumbled, trying to justify his actions, his voice almost inaudible. That excuse just added fuel to the fire. "Fake?" the mayor roared, his shout echoing throughout the park, causing several passers-by to stop and stare. "Are you blind or stupid? Do you see the silver star on his chest? Do you know what that means? It means he showed extraordinary courage in the face of this country's enemies while people like you sat at home watching TV. Do you see the Purple Heart? It means he bled for this country. And you? What do? You point a gun at a hero in a park named in his honor. You are a disgust to that badge, a disgust to this city." The mayor gasped, his face red with anger. He pointed a finger at Dugan. "Do you know why we're here? Because Colonel Sterling here, the man you call a phony, has volunteered his time without a penny to organize the Veterans Day Parade for this city, to honor men like him. I have an appointment with him at 9, right here, to discuss business. And I saw my officer pointing his gun at the city's guest of honor." Dugan stood rooted to the spot, his entire world collapsing. He had been wrong, horribly wrong. His complacency, his self-righteousness, all gone, replaced by naked fear and utter humiliation. He looked down at Sterling's ID card, still on the ground. Mayor Thompson didn't give him time to think. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed angrily. "Frank, it's me," he said into the phone, his voice icy. The person on the other end of the line was undoubtedly Chief of Police Frank Miller. "I'm at Memorial Park with Colonel Sterling. Your officer, Mitch Dugan, number 347, just pointed a gun at him." The mayor listened silently for a moment, then interrupted. "I don't care what his explanation is. I've heard enough. I want him suspended immediately." "No, not with pay, as is the procedure. Disarmed, stripped of his badge, and taken to the station. I want his dismissal on my desk by the end of the day. Do you hear me?" Another pause. "Good. And Frank," the mayor added, his voice menacing, "I will speak directly to the district attorney about criminal charges. This case will not go down. Is that clear?" He hung up without waiting for an answer. He turned to see Peters, Dugan's partner, standing near the patrol car, his face white with shock. "You!" The mayor pointed at Peters. "Pick up the colonel's ID badge and give it back to him, with both hands, and apologize to him." Peters hurried over, bent down to pick up the card, dusted it off, and solemnly handed it back to Sterling with both hands. I'm sorry, Colonel. I'm terribly sorry." Sterling took the card back and put it in his wallet. He said nothing to Peters. Throughout the mayor's storm of rage, Colonel Sterling stood silently. When the dust settled, he simply adjusted his tie and smoothed his lapels. He said nothing to Dugan. He didn't need to. His silence and unshakable dignity were the strongest indictment. He looked at the mayor, who was still panting, and spoke softly. "Bob, we have a parade to plan." Minutes later, 2 more patrol cars pulled up, sirens silent but lights flashing. A sergeant and a captain got out, their faces grim. They approached Duggan, who stood like a shell, and carried out their orders silently. They took his gun, his handcuffs, his badge, his radio. Mitch Duggan, who had been the embodiment of authority and law, now looked small and pathetic, being led away like a criminal by his own men. The fallout was swift and relentless. True to his word, Mitch Duggan was fired the same day. The incident caused a mini media storm in Crestwood, the story of a white police officer pointing a gun at a black colonel, a war hero, touched a sensitive national nerve. Veterans organizations across the country were outraged. The district attorney's office, under pressure from the mayor and public outrage, acted quickly. With testimony from Mayor Thompson and Colonel Sterling, along with the incontrovertible video from Duggan's body camera, which captured the entire incident, from the insults to the act of pulling the gun, the case went to trial. Duggan was charged with second-degree assault with a deadly weapon, terroristic threats, and abuse of power. His attorney tried to argue at trial that it was an unfortunate mistake stemming from overzealousness in fighting stolen valor, and that his client suffered from post-draft stress syndrome. But the judge, a stern woman named Esther Goldstein, an Air Force veteran, was having none of it. As she delivered her sentence, she looked directly at Duggan, who stood with his head bowed in civilian clothes. "Mr. Duggan," she said, her voice echoing in the solemn courtroom. "You say you acted to protect the honor of the military, but you did the opposite. You used your prejudice and ignorance as weapons. You did not see an officer, a gentleman, a hero. You saw only the color of his skin and jumped to an ugly and wrong conclusion. You insulted not only a man, but a legacy built on blood and tears. You dishonored the very honor you pretended to protect." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The court's sentence for you is 3 years and 5 months in prison, 41 months in a state prison to reflect on the price of hate and ignorance." A month later, on a crisp, cool November morning, Veterans Day arrived. The parade in Crestwood was a huge success, the largest and most formal in years. Main Street was packed with people waving American flags. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, eyes filled with admiration. On the honor stand, set up near the fountain, Colonel James Sterling stood in his uniform, dignified and straight. He stood beside Mayor Thompson, not as a victim, but as the honorary commander of the ceremony. As the veterans passed, from the elderly World War II soldiers in wheelchairs, to the Vietnam vets with distant eyes, to the young men and women just returned from Iraq and Afghanistan, they all looked up at the stands. When they saw Colonel Sterling, they stood up straighter, walked with more vigor. They raised their hands in salutes, a gesture of deep respect from soldier to soldier. Colonel Sterling raised his hand and returned the salute, his movements sharp and perfect. He felt a hot tear roll down his cheek. He did not cry for the pain of humiliation a month ago. That pain had been soothed by justice. He cried for the beauty of this moment, for the unity, for the respect shown so honestly. He cried because the honor that had been challenged now shone brighter than ever, not only on his own chest, but in the hearts of the entire community. Justice is not just about punishing a wrongdoer. Justice, in its highest form, is about restoring and honoring dignity. And that day, amid the drums of marching and the flags of waving flags, dignity triumphed. Honor is not determined by skin color, but by deeds and sacrifice. A uniform is more than cloth and metal. It is a living legacy, woven from the courage and duty of those who wear it. Prejudice is a poison that blinds the soul, preventing one from seeing the truth and dignity before one's eyes. It turns a protector into an oppressor. True justice is not just punishing the wrongdoers in the dark, but honoring and protecting the honor of the worthy in the light of day. How important was Mayor Thompson's response in resolving this situation? How do you feel about Colonel Sterling's composure throughout the confrontation? Is that true strength? What does this story make you think about respect for veterans and the fight against prejudice in our society today?